And welcome back to the Law News Network. I'm your host, Amy Dash. You were just listening to a confession from Luis Toledo to police that he killed his wife, Yesenia Suarez. I'd like to bring in our Law News trial producer, Cathy Russon. Hi, Cathy. I did it again. It's Russon. It's Russon, right? I keep giving it this French twist.
You make it sound fancy.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. So you've been following, obviously, every element of this trial. How important was the confession video that we just watched to the prosecution's case?
Well, it's everything. Anytime you can get a defendant to confess to the crime. The interesting thing about that confession, though, as he goes on, it's like truth laced with lies, if you believe the prosecution's theory of the case, because he goes on to talk about how Tyshawn Jackson was there, and then he went upstairs with the kids, and he killed the kids, and he completely removes himself from the killing of the kids, and yet the way he says things happen has a ring of truth to it. But just take out the Tyshawn Jackson part, the next door neighbor, and it really sounds like he's told them everything that happened, except trying to remove himself from the kids. So anytime you have, he's talking about karate chopping her in the throat, that he knows he was too strong. That's why he's never hit her before, because he knows he's too strong and he could kill her. You know what? It probably happened. They were probably heated. You know, she went back over there that night. He found out she had an affair. There was a confrontation the day before. So now here they are back up together again. And, or actually the confrontation was that day, and she went back home that night and he was there. And they probably got a heated fight.
Well, it seems the prosecutors did buy into that story because they charged him with second-degree murder. So, you know, maybe they think, okay, it could have been in self-defense. Did his defense ever really raise that self-defense theory to try to get him out of any liability for the killing of his wife?
It's interesting because they didn't bring up anything about his confession in their opening statement. And we had known all along from pretrial hearings that he had confessed to doing that to his wife. So we expected to see that. And so when that didn't happen, it made sense later, because then as the day came that they were going to play the police interrogation video, the defense objected, said that the state had yet to prove that even murders or death even happened because there's no bodies. So they were objecting right up to the last minute for that to be played. That's why they didn't mention the openings. Now, we don't know. After lunch is when we're going to find out really what the defense cops to, because they haven't said during this trial what they admit to. We just have seen the interrogation videos.
But Cathy, it's also possible, right, that his story about karate chopping his wife in the neck is also a lie. That he may have gone there that night to the house after finding out by installing spyware on her phone that she cheated on him, after confronting her and her lover at the workplace, that he went there with the intention and premeditation to kill his wife, and did so in a brutal fashion, because we really don't know how she died.
No, well, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole thing. Her body and the body of those two children, they have never been found and may never be found. So we don't know what happened. The only person that knows what happened is the defendant. So maybe it didn't happen that way. For me, it's believable. We saw and read all the text messages that went back and forth between them yesterday. And even for a couple weeks prior, and then the day of, and could see their whole line of communication. And while he was angry, it didn't seem like he wanted to kill her, or I don't know. And then she was staying at her mom's house. She was not going to go home, and he was headed home to get his stuff and leave and move out. And then she agrees to go so they can talk about things. For me, it's more believable that when then they finally are face to face after the work confrontation, after the affair confrontation. This is the first time they're back face to face with each other, and I think it just blew up. That's believable to me. It blew up. He blew up. Now, we heard him in the 911 call from the workplace, and you can hear him in the background screaming, and you can hear how intense he is and how angry he is. So that gives us an idea of how the fight probably went down that night, and he lost it. That's my opinion. He lost it, and he probably did hit her. Maybe he hit her multiple times. Maybe he beat the living daylights out of her. We don't really know how that happened. And when he says, in his story, then the neighbor's with him, and the neighbor's there, and then the little girl comes downstairs and says, "Who's yelling for help?" And Tyshawn Jackson takes the kids back upstairs, and then Toledo hears a thud. And so that's his story. But in reality, what probably really happened, because I don't believe Tyshawn Jackson was there, that the kids were asleep, the fight happens, it wakes up the little girl, she comes down, and it's just like he said, except then he has to take care of the kids, because now they know what he did to their mom.
Yeah, seeing the pictures of the children, it's literally making my heart sink into my
So
stomach.
horrifying.
So tragically heartbreaking to look at their beautiful faces and think, what did these children do to deserve that? I mean, especially the wife as well. Nobody deserves to be brutally murdered, but the children, they were not involved in any way, shape, or form in this affair. And so for them to be killed, and we assume that they were killed because the blood of the little girl has been found in multiple spots around the house, and their bodies are still missing, is just horrifying.
They're 8 and 9 years old. What did those two little kids have to do with anything? And Toledo refers to them as his kids. Now, he's not the father, but he'd been with her for a long time. And when he refers to them, he refers to them as his kids. So he obviously had some feelings for these kids. It's so horrific. And the thing is, we don't know how they died. Look, I guarantee you, they're dead. And the mom's dead. The defense can say whatever they want about bodies not being found. They're gone. They're dead. And we don't know how those little kids were murdered, but we know that they weren't just like shot in the head, because there's no evidence of that. So whatever it was probably wasn't quick like that. It's just horrifying. And the jury is going to have to take all that into consideration, because remember, they can find him guilty of lesser charges than first-degree murder. That came out in jury instructions that when they were going over them. The official jury instructions will be tomorrow morning to the jury. But when the judge and attorneys were going over them yesterday, we had our cameras on, and they can do lesser. So, but the jury can go with first-degree murder on those children. If they do, then he faces the death penalty.
As he should, in my opinion, if he actually killed those children, because under Florida law, it is an aggravating factor. You are eligible for the death penalty if you kill a child under 12 years old. But it's just bizarre because like you're saying, the bodies have not been found. We cannot conclusively say whether they're dead or alive, but all signs point to the fact that they are probably not alive. However, he admits that he saw the neighbor, Tyshawn Jackson, kill these children with an axe. Later on, he tells police he will not tell them where the bodies are. Then he denies having anything to do with the killing of the children. So he's telling us they're dead. He's blaming the neighbor. The neighbor gets on the stand and says that he told him that he snapped. But really, we don't know whether the neighbor was involved in any way, shape, or form. There's been no evidence to find that, though he did admit that he helped him take the wife's car and dispose of rags and teddy bears and different stuffed animals belonging to these children and wipe down the car and things like that.
Well, but he didn't help him wipe down the car. Now, look.
But he helped him get the car to a certain location by driving another car. This is what he admits to.
No, I feel that Tyshawn Jackson was very credible on the stand. And that's important, because that's what jury members are going to have to determine about how credible he was. And in my opinion, he was credible, and he was believable to me. And if you believe this guy, he gets woken up to a tapping on his window by Toledo at like sometime after 6 a.m. in the morning. And he comes down even without his cell phone. He just comes down in his shorts and stuff that he's sleeping in. And Toledo says, "Hey, I need you to help me. I need to take my wife's car somewhere." And he doesn't think they're going far, because like her mom lives right there in the neighborhood. So he just jumps in and follows him. And then he says, as they get on a freeway and they start going further, and now he's thinking, what is going on? And then Toledo pulls into a Publix parking lot, and then he watches him start cleaning up the car. And that's his story. And then he's like, I don't know what I've gotten myself into. Well, that's believable, because at 5 o'clock in the morning, Toledo shows up at his brother's house, and his brother testified. And Toledo asked his brother to help him with the car. And his brother says on the stand, I didn't want any part of it.
Right,
So
and why didn't
we know
Tyshawn
that
Jackson
happened.
say that?
So
He's
then
playing
he
a
shows
little
up
bit.
at Tyshawn Jackson.
Right, but Tyshawn Jackson, in my opinion, the story sounds like a little bit too blameless. You know, because, I didn't know until he started actually wiping down the car with the cleaning agent that something might be awry.
Well, think about it. If he doesn't know anything's happened next door, he doesn't know. What would make him believe that his wife and the 2 kids are dead? What would make the neighbor even believe that? And if he did believe that, what if Toledo went to him that morning and said, we just had a huge fight and I accidentally killed her. I need your help. I mean, is he going to do that? They're not like they're ride and die friends, lifelong friends. They'd been, riding to barber school together, and he'd lived next door. But I don't know. It's funny because we've had our other hosts and analysts all skeptical of him, and yet I'm not skeptical of him, and most of the trial watchers are not. So
and the police as well, right? Because the police as well, or not, because he hasn't been charged with accomplice liability or really having any involvement in the murder or the cover-up.
The police believe him. And, the defense was calling him back in their case in chief. And Ken Belkin was all over this yesterday while we were waiting for him to call back. He was saying that, look, he's going to have to plead the fifth. He's not going to be able to say things because this is different than just cross-examination. On and on and on. They called him back and asked him like 2 questions, and it was so uneventful. And if they didn't go at him at all. So that just fell flat. Their whole case fell flat, actually. They called 3 witnesses, very short, rested. It was like nothing. So
that
they're
was
relying
shocking
strictly
to
on their
me.
cross-examination.
Yeah, that was really shocking to me about how weak of a case the defense put on. But, I'm really interested in what you thought were the most powerful moments of the prosecution's closing arguments.
He did such a great job. So just walking the juries through, this is exactly how closing arguments are supposed to be. And he did it exactly how they're supposed to be. Walk them through the timeline of events that we know from facts and testimony and evidence put into the trial. And that's what he did. He walked through exactly what led up to this. From a couple weeks earlier when she tells him, I want a divorce. We saw all those text messages. He had a timeline up there. He had a poster up there with the timeline of exactly what happened. Another great thing he said was, don't get full. You need to pay attention to the small details because Toledo talked a lot and he told a lot of different stories. And so he pointed out the important details that Toledo said, which would be things like the little girl came down the stairs, and that now we know why he had to kill the children. Things like that. I thought it was a fantastic. Look, I don't always like the openings or closings from attorneys. They can fall flat for me, or they can be a real hit. And I feel like he really did a great job.
At one point, one of the investigators took the stand and was asked point blank, "Do you have any evidence that he killed the children?" And he said no. How important will that be to the determination, do you think, by the jurors to whether or not to convict him on the first-degree murder charges, which, as you said, carry the death penalty?
Yeah, it's very interesting because of the no body and because of the no direct evidence. These are just 12 average citizens. They're not you and me that do this all the time, day in and day out, and see all of this. I mean, I could easily find him guilty. Look, I'm done with him. For me, it's guilty, and it's guilty first degree. That's my opinion on this. Those 12 jurors, it weighs on them. We know from interviews with jurors how a death penalty case weighs on them when they have someone's life in their hands. And these are just 12 average citizens that didn't ask to make this, monumental decision. Mm-hmm. They could easily go with lesser charge on the children because of the lack of evidence and the lack of bodies.
I think also, you have that DNA from blood in different portions of the house matching the little girl, but also his confession is very convincing to me because he says the children were killed, albeit by the neighbor, but with axes. So can that be used, do you think, to support the first-degree murder charges with regard to the children?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's going to be the number one thing I'm thinking they're going to talk about when they're in there is about the kids, because really, what do they have to talk about when it comes to the wife? I mean, there is some lesser charges. They could go down from second degree, I guess. So I guess they could talk about that. But can wait and see what the defense closing is like. But my guess is all the talk is going to be about the first-degree murder of those children when they get into that jury room, and who believes it and who doesn't. But you're right. By his own admission, the children are dead. Everyone's dead. So it really doesn't matter if no bodies have been found, because the defendant admits that all 3 of them are dead. And he tells how it happens, but removes himself from the children. And I don't think the jury is going to buy it. I just don't know if they're going to go first degree.
When we see that knife that was discarded by Toledo, and he admits that this serrated knife was his, makes me wonder whether it was used in the commission of the crimes. And what keeps ringing through my head is, how did he get rid of all the blood? If he used a knife, or however he killed these people, if he did it, how was he able to make the scene, and the car, potentially he transported them somewhere in the car because they weren't in the house. How was he able to make everything so immaculate? I mean, I know that the sheriff came in and said that when he entered the house, it smelled like pine sol, like a cleaning agent. And then the defense said, well, just because a house smells really clean doesn't mean that a murder took place there. But we have the DNA from the little girl, her blood, different portions of the house. But there's just a couple of drops of blood, small little stains, a stain on the mat of her mother's car. But I mean, you've got 3 people. If somebody kills 3 people, presumably in a violent manner, because he's saying it happened with an axe, and you'd think there's blood everywhere, then he has to transport them to get rid of the bodies, or somebody else has to transport them, whoever did it in this case, right? Because he hasn't been convicted yet. Where did all the blood go?
Well, that's the thing. This knife that kept being brought up, the defense has been having a fit about it, because the knife has not been able to be tied to any of this. And it was completely clean, and it was found outside on the ground, and a teenage neighbor girl found it. So it might be a red herring in this case. It may have nothing to do with this case, quite frankly.
Okay, but you're telling me that the children were axed to death, and there's virtually no blood anywhere? It's amazing to me. Like, what, is this person an industrial cleaner at night, or does he moonlight for some cleaning company? How is he so good, if he did this, at wiping this place to virtually get rid of all traces of evidence except for a few stains from one person?
A little key thing he said, that's why the prosecutor kept saying pay attention to the details, is that Tyshawn Jackson killed the children upstairs in the bathroom in the bathtub. So if that's any truth to that at all, that can explain how you can get rid of a lot of blood if a killing happens in a bathtub. That's the only thing really that I can think of. Otherwise, getting killed, first of all, killing children with an axe, I can't even think about it. I can't even go there.
No, it's sickening.
So if that really why would that even need to happen? First of all, why do you just have an axe? Secondly, why is that your choice? So
why not put the children with the grandmother? Drop the children with the grandmother, or something.
Well,
to that
because they
effect.
were witnesses. That's the whole prosecution theory, is that now the prosecution theory is he thinks he can somehow mitigate the killing of his wife. It was a fight. It was a heat of the moment kind of killing. We get this heat of passion defenses when you find out your spouse is cheating on you. And he thinks he can either get out of that or get a lesser sentence. This is the prosecution. But then the children are there, and they saw what actually happened and heard what actually happened. And now he has no choice but to get rid of them.
Okay, and if, like you're saying, potentially they were killed in a bathtub, that might indicate some planning, some premeditation. Where can I kill these children where I can clean up the mess the easiest? Do you think that the prosecution should have honed in more upon that little fact in their closing?
Yeah, maybe. They have a rebuttal. So we'll see what the prosecution rebuttal is going to be after the defense. They have the last say, and usually that's really when a good prosecution team brings it home. And you're like, oh, at the end you stand up and clap. I mean, sometimes that's how you feel. Mm-hmm. They need to do that with this because, there's a lot of evidence, and then there's not really evidence. You can look at this both ways. I know it's a circumstantial case, but, we have him on tape confessing to it. And there is really a lot of evidence, in my opinion, in this case. The biggest discussion in the jury room is going to be what degree. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your insight. And I'm sure you'll keep everybody up to date. Oh, I wanted you to just tell our viewers what happened with the Michigan versus Jeffrey Willis trial, which we were covering, but now they can catch audio only, right? Streaming on our website. Just let them know where they can catch that and why it's audio only at this point.
Yes, a local media station that was the pool camera the other day inadvertently showed the jurors. The camera was pointed toward the jury door, don't know why, and after a break, they all filed in and were shown on camera. Earlier in the day, this same camera crew showed the minor witness on the stand when they weren't supposed to. So it was like 2 strikes, you are out. The judge said, that's it. No cameras at all. Then he changed his mind a couple hours later and said, I'll allow you to stream the audio only. So when viewers go to our site, LawNewz.com, you'll see under the live trial feeds, you'll see Jeffrey Willis, and click on there, and we just have a graphic up for you so you can at least listen to the trial, but that is why we're not seeing the trial.
And this is a man in Michigan who is accused of killing a jogger. It was unsolved for many years, and then there was allegedly an attempted kidnapping of someone else who turned him in. They recovered his van, found some disturbing things in there, and then charged him with this murder. And he's also charged with another murder in a separate case, also a case that had gone unsolved for quite some time. So you can catch that trial on our website, like Cathy said. Cathy, thank you so much.